With enormous breaking news, we begin with this, reporting from our Brian Windhorst and Ramona Shelburne that Kawhi Leonard, with a knee injury he suffered in the final moments of Game 4 the other night, will miss tonight's Game 5 between the Clippers and Jazz in Utah, and his status for the remainder of this series is in jeopardy. We saw him colliding with Joe Ingles the other night late in the game. His team was way ahead, and Jalen Rose joins us here, and I see you shaking your head. Go ahead, I'll give you the floor, big fella. What's your reaction?
This is not good for the NBA, the Los Angeles Clippers, the news about Kawhi Leonard's injury. This, in theory, was the impetus that got him out of San Antonio. Whether it was misdiagnosed by the Spurs, we'll never truly know the story. But you remember, Greeny, because that's when we first started this show. And he played 9 games for the Spurs that year. And he went on to become a Toronto Raptor, had to rehabilitate his reputation, and also won a championship there. So now going home to the Clippers, with the Lakers eliminated in the first round, the Clippers, for the first time in the history of their franchise, have the canvas of Los Angeles for everybody to watch and celebrate the greatness of Kawhi Leonard, who he and Paul George just had back-to-back 30-point games. And when you look at the All-NBA team, Kawhi's first team. But when you look at the MVP race, we never talked about Kawhi. You know why? It wasn't because the Clippers weren't good. It's because, unfortunately, he became the face of load management. And Adam Silver came on this show and told us it was more maintenance with players like this that miss games. So for now, his knee injury to cause him to miss the end of the playoff game, and now a significant time potentially, it would be hard-pressed for him to come back in this series in particular. I just hope, without speculating, it doesn't cost him the rest of this season.
All right, and so let me ask you, if he can't play in this series, will the rest of the season extend beyond this week? Can you see them winning 2 games from Utah without him?
No. And by the way, if you're the Utah Jazz, and I want to make sure I, give credence to the fact that the Utah Jazz are playing without Mike Conley. But losing the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard, to me, is the equivalent of the Bucks losing to the Nets, basically without Harden and Kyrie Irving. It just can't happen. It won't happen. Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, Jordan Clarkson, they will get it together. The Utah Jazz had the best regular season record in the entire NBA. The Clippers will not beat the Jazz if Kawhi Leonard doesn't come back.
All right, so again, devastating news for the Clippers, for their fans, and most importantly for Kawhi. In the meantime, that's one of 2 major breaking stories we have in this hour. The other comes from Phoenix, where superstar point guard Chris Paul has entered the NBA's health and safety protocol and is out indefinitely, jeopardizing his availability for the Western Conference Finals. A source confirming that news to ESPN this morning. The Athletic first reported that Paul would be sidelined indefinitely as a result of entering the protocol. Very importantly, if he is already vaccinated against COVID, he could be facing a shorter absence from the Suns. We do not know one way or the other relative to that yet. It is an important point to make. And Jalen, you were the one who actually pointed it out to me when we ran into each other earlier this week. They have a long rest. The earliest they could play is Sunday. It could get pushed back to next Tuesday if this other series winds up going 7. So that seems as though it will work in their favor. What is your reaction to this news about Chris Paul?
Unlike Kawhi, this one isn't doom and gloom for me because they're off this week. He's already been vaccinated. And I know the word indefinitely makes you feel like he may not be in the next series. I don't anticipate him missing more than 1 game at the most, just based on the dynamics of time and how the protocol has worked. However, has there been a guy that's an all-time great player that just gets unlucky at the wrong time, like Chris Paul? I saw it happen at different stops at every point in his career. It seems like he plays all NBA basketball, then he gets hurt. Then Blake Griffin gets hurt. And then the team misses 27 straight threes. It's always something dubious, unfortunately, for Chris Paul when his teams don't advance in the playoffs. But I think he returns for this series, Greeny. I think his leadership is going to be paramount in the next series. So don't anticipate him not playing. I know the word indefinitely is going to scare everybody, as it should. But I anticipate Chris Paul will find a way to be available for the next series.
Right, the literal definition of indefinitely is we don't know. Let's get as much information as we can from Malika, who is good enough to rejoin us here. Malika, thank you so much. It was you, I know, who confirmed this news for ESPN. What more can you tell us?
Well, right now, Chris Paul is in the league's health and safety protocols. As I've been listening to you guys mention, we just don't have a specific timeline yet. As you mentioned, Greeny, for vaccinated individuals, if that is the situation here, that could expedite his return. This is unfortunate for the Suns, right? Because Devin Booker has said all season long, he told me earlier this year, look, one of the things I love about Chris Paul is that at one point during the season, when I walked into the locker room, Chris Paul was saying, we're not going for just making the playoffs here. We're going for winning 16 games. And so for the Suns, this has been one of the healthier teams through this postseason. Yes, early on, Chris Paul was dealing with a shoulder injury, but Chris Paul has meant so much to this team. The synergy that he has provided and helped this young Suns team has given them experience. So right now, as you said, there's just a lot of unknowns about this situation. But as Jalen mentioned, you can be rest assured that as soon as Chris Paul is ready to go, he's going to be back out there with his teammates, Greeny.
Well, Malika, you've been around so much of this in so many different ways, dating back to all that time you spent in the bubble. I want to make sure that we have this right. However long it is that he is away, he is completely separated from his team and everybody else, right? So all the leadership we're talking about, meetings, anything else, practice, he will be, however long he's away, he will be fully away from his teammates, yes?
At least physically, but for one thing we know for certain, right? It's a good thing we have cell phones. It's a good thing we have FaceTime. It's a good thing we're able to make phone calls and send texts, because you have to believe that that's someone, Chris Paul is someone who's going to be radioing in all of these different ways. But yes, in terms of the league's health and safety protocols, they have evolved obviously as the coronavirus has evolved in this country, the way we treat it, the way that vaccinations have impacted it. But physically, yes, there does need to be a separation still under the league's current health and safety protocol guidelines.
Okay, Malika, stay if you can. Jalen, I want to get to KD. Who would have thought that it would take us this long to get to one of the genuinely great performances in NBA postseason history? Kevin Durant and his Nets last night down 17 at one stage to Milwaukee. But you've seen the moments here. Fourth quarter, he's bringing them back with his team having cut it to 2. That gives them their first lead since it was 2-0. Then just over 5 minutes to go in the fourth. Nets by 1. It's Durant again. He was on a roll. He scored 49 points last night. Huge moment here. 1:20 to go. Bucks down by 2. Giannis, the free throw line has been an adventure for him. He missed the front end there. He would make the second, so it's a 1-point game, and that would set up this. A 1-point lead. James Harden, Kevin Durant, shot clock at 2, at 1. Can you believe he knocks that down? 49 points for Kevin Durant, who played all 48 minutes. He added 17 rebounds and 10 assists. And then here's Milwaukee's last chance. It's Middleton and Giannis. They turn it over, and the Nets improbably come away with an incredible win, 114-108. What a night Kevin Durant had.
One of the best scorers to ever play the game. It's tough. It's tough. You know, like he's the best. He's the best player in the world right now, and we gotta beat him as a team.
So, Jalen, a lot to unpack there. Look at him, Malika. What is that? Why the face?
Nobody loves Giannis more than me. Greeny, you know that. I picked the Bucks to win this series. Let's start with that. I picked the Bucks to win this series. But I'm really disappointed in Giannis. One of the more genuine human beings away from the floor. This is not assassinating his character. I'm literally talking about basketball. Let me tell you the multiple ways I'm disappointed in Giannis. Number one, in the fourth quarter of that game when Kevin Durant is taking over and James Harden is hobbled, Giannis has to look at the other 14 guys in the coaching staff and say, I got him. That didn't happen. I'm disappointed in that. Number two, KD played 48 minutes. James Harden was stuck on Giannis on a post-up. James Harden waved the help away with a bad hamstring. And Giannis took a turnaround, low percentage, fall away jump shot. Chris Middleton drives to the basket, drops it off to Giannis, and he drops the ball. So that's the Giannis part of this. Now let's celebrate KD. 48 minutes, 49 points. We haven't seen those numbers like that in a playoff game. And he did it in every facet. But here's what I like about KD's buckets. those last few threes that he made late in the game, those weren't normal shooting motions. Those were great player heat checks. Like the last three you just showed, that was great D. How about this? He made 9 field goals in the fourth quarter. 9. All of them were contested. Each of those shots were contested. So it wasn't like they just lost. They got beat by an all-time great player with a terrific performance.
Scored 49 points on 23 shots. So, Malika, again, you were around this team all the time, but the most important piece of this is they keep their season reasonably alive last night, but they still need one more win. What do we expect the status of Harden and Kyrie to be going forward for Game 6 and possibly 7?
Well, James Harden is certainly determined to play in Game 6. He said yesterday that that's what he's planning on. He's planning on getting treatment, resting up, and preparing to play in Game 6 in Milwaukee, Greeny. Now, as I mentioned, as we talked about earlier, he had a lot of kinesiology tape on that hamstring. There were times that he didn't look like he was moving quite like himself during that game. But he said, you know what, I hope I gave some elevation, some lift, even just spiritually, morally to my teammates by being out there. He said he woke up in the morning and said, you know what, it's the playoffs. Let's go. We're going to do this. And that's his plan once again, seeing how he feels over these next couple of hours. As for Kyrie Irving, the Nets are still preparing for the distinct possibility that they may not have him for the rest of this series, whether it goes to 6 or 7.
Okay, what's that, Jalen?
How's James Harden coming back, Malika, playing more minutes than Giannis? Like, seriously, he played more minutes, Greeny, than Giannis. Mm-hmm. I'm really disappointed. And shout to James Harden, because a guy that goes from basically being out to upgraded twice in the same day to get out there and play on a hamstring that we know is bothering him and was a shell of himself, that was phenomenal courage by James Harden.
Okay, I have to leave it there, guys. Outstanding. Thank you. Malika, thank you so much for jumping back in quickly. Jalen, the best as always. We will see you tomorrow night with all the coverage as the playoffs continue here. It's just absolutely wild. And then speaking of absolutely wild, did you see what Aaron Rodgers did yesterday? This was